On Talking Points, Trump's travel ban continues to face criticism from federal lawyers on its legality and constitutionality, and 3 judges met Tuesday to discuss it.
That the state has met its burden of demonstrating that it faces immediate and irreparable injury as a result of the signing and implementation of the executive order.
Across the Atlantic, protests in Romania are erupting, raising questions about the legitimacy of its government.
I saw millions of people who support us, and we have the same support, in public support, and we want to put in practice our program.
And the candidates for France's May election are all but settled. The outcome is anything but. All that and more ahead.
Good evening, Syracuse. I'm Josh Carney.
And I'm Mike Riccardi. We begin tonight by taking a look at the inner workings of the Senate floor.
Following this week's cabinet hearing, some are beginning to question the nature of this long-standing congressional procedure.
It's a reaction to the Senate's silencing of Senator Elizabeth Warren after she tried to read a letter written by Coretta Scott King, the widow of Martin Luther King Jr., during the confirmation hearings for Senator Jeff Sessions.
The question becomes, what are the implications of this and what does it mean for stalemates in Congress moving forward?
For now, Democrats and Republicans alike are defending their own. Here's what Idaho Senator James Risch had to say.
We have rules around here, and the rules are very clear that you don't impugn another senator. Now, you can't do that in your words, and you can't do it with writings. You can't hold up a writing that impugns another senator and say, well, this is what somebody...
So we just heard what Senator James Risch had to say. He said you can't say these things about a senator in your own words or in writing. I'm not so sure that that applies to somebody who's being nominated for a cabinet position. I think you have to vet them to the fullest extent.
Right, you have to vet them to the fullest extent, but this also shows that they're more concerned with the procedural effects and the procedural implications rather than getting what needs to be done. So it's really on the onus of the senators who are going through this nomination process to look at it with a critical eye, but not be so skeptical that it creates brinksmanship.
Not only that, I'm not sure that this was the right move for Republicans to silence Elizabeth Warren. She's a big voice on the left, and it's only going to infuriate Democrats.
Definitely rally the base for sure.
After the break, we will be talking about the legality of President Trump's travel ban.
And Talking Points local correspondent Ray Marek met with SU students attending an open house for those affected by the ban. Stay with us.
Well, Thomas, you've got pre-diabetes. But with more exercise and a change in diet, it can be reversed.
I've tried exercising. It just makes me hungry for bacon.
I love bacon, too. And who really likes to exercise?
Not me.
Me neither.
Nobody. So we're good?
What? Oh, you still have pre-diabetes. Big time.
Here's your check. Oh, you got it.
You know, since I got rid of my car, I really enjoy walking.
Okay. Got it. No.
Getting pulled over for buzz driving could cost you around $10,000 in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates.
Oh, you're home early. You live with your mom?
That'll set your game back a few years. Buzzed, busted, and broke. Because buzz driving is drunk driving.
They said I have troll teeth.
That my voice sounded like a possessed baby doll.
That no one would ever love someone as stupid as me.
That I was fat, ugly.
Disgusting.
The effect of bullying is potent.
We will no longer be the silent majority.
Now, when you see online bullying, there's something you can do about it.
We're gonna take action with the I.
I am a witness.
I am a witness.
I am a witness.
I am a witness.
I am a witness, and so are you.
After a federal judge in Seattle blocked President Trump's controversial ban on Friday, Trump's Department of Justice challenged the ruling. Arguments were heard in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals this week. Tonight, the appeals court decided to maintain the suspension on the executive order. Here to break down the legal arguments on both sides is Talking Points national correspondent Galat Malamed. Galat, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Galat, what are the legal questions at hand?
So the legal question, this case was not about whether the travel ban was constitutional or not, and I think that's a big misconception. What the case was about is if the travel ban should not be reinstated for a temporary time period while the legal battle is proceeding. So that was just the question: is should the travel ban remain not reinstated, or should it be reinstated?
So what are the arguments on both sides of this, for reinstating it or for suspending it still?
Right, so Trump's team, what they were arguing on Tuesday was that this is completely in the president's power. It's completely constitutional for him to do. He has power over national security, and he also has power over immigration. And they had amicus briefs from, Citizens United, U.S. Justice Foundation, a lot of places. What the other side was saying was that, what Washington was saying is that this is causing irreparable harm to our state. It's complete and utter chaos. And they had 17 states writing amicus briefs for them and Washington, D.C. So there was a lot of support on both sides.
And what do you make of the verdict?
Well, the verdict, it's not very surprising. This is one of the most liberal courts in the country. It's known as one of the most liberal courts. And a quote from the decision is that, quote, "The public also has an interest in free flow of travel, in avoiding separation of families, and in freedom from discrimination." So based off that ruling, this is what Washington's been arguing the entire time. So it's not surprising that this is what the outcome was.
So the appeals court decided to maintain the suspension of the ban.
Yes.
Can we expect that to go to the Supreme Court?
100% yes. Trump took to Twitter right after the decision was made, saying in capital letters, "See you in court." It'll be interesting because it's still a 4-4 court. Gorsuch is not going to be on the court by the time this gets there. It should be a speedy process. So potentially it could be a 4-4 tie, which means this court's decision would remain. Or you could have some judges flip-flopping. After all, Judge Robart was put on the court by George Bush, so it doesn't really matter what party you're from. You could still rule against the ban.
Well, thank you for joining us, Galat. Glad to be here.
Thanks for having me.
Well, as legal battles over President Trump's refugee ban continue, the university hosted an open house to show support for vulnerable students. Talking Point's local correspondent Ray Marek has more on why many are frustrated.
Amid controversy over President Trump's so-called refugee ban, the SU Chancellor held an open house at the Syracuse Center this week to show his support for vulnerable students.
The Chancellor's been clear to all of his administrative staff that we need to be supportive of any students, faculty, or staff that are impacted.
Now, students were given the unique opportunity to meet one-on-one with university representatives, but the low turnout could be indicative of his half-hearted message.
Based off of how little I know how he feels, yes, he definitely hasn't really made his opinion clear.
These students say the Chancellor just isn't doing enough.
Yes, he's sending out emails, but what does the email do? I read it for 5 minutes of my life, and it has no effect. He needs to come out and show up to the rallies and the sit-ins and all of these protests that people are doing.
Meanwhile, many have already felt the impact of the president's new executive order.
Like, I have a friend from high school who actually was not able to leave Dulles until a judge blocked the ban.
And concerns stretch beyond just this refugee ban.
I think they impact everyone, especially all my friends who are DACA, just like my siblings. They don't know what they're doing after school.
DACA, of course, stands for Deferred Action for Early Arrivals, undocumented students who have arrived in the U.S. at the age of 15 or younger. Now reporting for CitrusTV, Ray Marek.
As chief strategist to the president, former Breitbart executive Steve Bannon is one of the few people in Trump's administration that has the ear of the president. The two share similar viewpoints, and former House Speaker Newt Gingrich said Bannon intends to take on the role of the, quote, intellectual strategist bomb thrower in the White House. Talking Points contributor Sabrina Maggiore is here to discuss where Bannon's influence is felt. Sabrina, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So my first question is, What kind of access does Steve Bannon have in the White House, and what kind of influence comes with that?
Sure. So as we know, he's the chief strategist to the White House, which means he's the top advisor in terms of messaging, strategy, and other partisan issues. But recently, Trump reorganized the National Security Council in an executive order and gave Bannon a seat on the Principals Committee, which is a meeting of the top military aides and advisors, and it includes the Secretary of State and the Secretary of Defense. And this is an elevation of a political advisor to a status over the president's top military aides and strategists. And it essentially reinforces the notion that he is co-chief of staff along with Reince Priebus.
Now, given his NSC appointment, what kind of precedent does this set?
Past administrations ran their national security councils with a wall of separation between partisan advisors and military strategists. So this is controversial because Bannon has some really strong political views with regards to foreign policy and other issues. And after his appointment, Democratic members of Congress essentially urged Trump to remove Bannon from the position. So
I want to read you a quote here. It's a Steve Bannon quote from an interview he did with the Daily Beast in August. Bannon said, quote, "I'm a Leninist. Lenin wanted to destroy the state, and that's my goal too. I want to bring everything crashing down and destroy all of today's establishment." What do you make of that quote, and how do you think that impacts foreign policy decisions now that he's on the NSC?
So, as I said before, he has some pretty extreme foreign policy views, particularly with regards to both Islamic terrorism and U.S. relations with China. In March 2016, he actually said, quote, "We're going to war in the South China Sea in 5 to 10 years, aren't we?" And so Bannon is very wary of China's growing influence in Asia, and he characterizes the relationship between the U.S. and China as one that's very adversarial. So another foreign hotspot he's identified is the Middle East, and he's branded Islam the most radical religion in the world and indicated that it's not a religion of peace. So I think this is significant in terms of foreign policy, particularly because Bannon has the ear of Trump, and he was one of the central characters in sort of pushing the refugee ban. So we know he's
Now, considering Bannon's history and his career within the media, what is his influence on the media going forward in this new role?
Yeah, so he is really harsh on traditional media, and he doesn't frequently speak to the press, but in a New York Times interview, he actually said that, quote, "the media should be embarrassed and humiliated and keep its mouth shut and just listen for a while." So he's very hostile towards the media, and he's called it the opposition party multiple times before.
Sabrina, thank you very much for joining us. When we come back, we will be talking about the upcoming French elections.
And we will take a look at protests in Romania. Don't go away.
You've messed up your son's haircut.
Mom?
Do you A, try to fix it?
Like it never happened.
B, work with what you got? Or C, show solidarity?
Thank you, baby. As a parent, there are no perfect answers. But you don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same.
Look at you. You're at the top of your game. You're unstoppable. Nothing can throw you off track. Wait, is that your car? Uh-oh. Yeah, I saw that coming. That will throw you off track. You're looking at around 10 grand in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates. Let's try this again. Smart move. Because buzz driving is drunk driving.
Taking care of a family member can lead to plenty of questions. Fortunately, there's a place to get the answers, for them and for you. Find articles, tips, and tools from experts and others who have been in your place. The Caregiving Resource Center at aarp.org/caregiving.
All eyes are on the coming French elections. Following a year of populist victories and establishment upsets, France's two-man general election candidates are set with centrist Emmanuel Macron and and far-right candidate Marine Le Pen. Marine Le Pen leads the National Front Party, which is enjoying recent success in France. Talking Points international correspondent Elijah Shama is here to explain where Le Pen stands and what to watch moving forward. Elijah, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
What are Le Pen's opinions on issues such as immigration and terrorism?
Le Pen has very strong issues when it comes to immigration and terrorism. She wants to limit France's intake of refugees and just immigration in general to 10,000 people. That's down from 200,000. She also has made comments basically saying you wouldn't let these refugees kind of in your home, in your flat. You wouldn't let them just be in your space. You wouldn't trust them to do that. She's very wary. She's been very critical of Hollande's government and his dealing with the Paris attacks, the Nice attacks. She's kind of jumped on every opportunity she can to kind of beat on him when it comes to the French government's reaction.
Now, there's a lot of skeptical behavior in the EU. What could Marine Le Pen mean for the EU if she is elected?
Marine Le Pen could be very disastrous for the EU. When you look at her stances on things, she advocates for a referendum within 6 months of her election. So if she's elected, she'd want to start a referendum in what France would do and France's position in the EU immediately. Part of her campaign is kind of rallying against this kind of globalist idea, which is very much an EU idea.
Right. And considering those circumstances, could we potentially see what would be dubbed a Frexit?
I would say that if Marine Le Pen was to come to power, I think a Frexit would be a real possibility. And with that, a Frexit would very much lead to the end of the EU. It would be very hard to keep that coalition of states together without really its other biggest contributor besides Germany.
Are we sure we want to go with Frexit? Just kidding. Are there parallels between Marine Le Pen and Trump?
There very much are. When you look at the rhetoric, it's that same kind of harsh rhetoric. Marine Le Pen was even said that Donald Trump's election was a great victory for populism everywhere. They're very much kind of cut from the same cloth in a lot of ways. Marine Le Pen's a little bit more polished and a little bit less brash when she kind of goes off the cuff, but she very much has that same kind of distrust, populist, very right-wing, anti-globalist, anti-immigrant, kind of wary doom and gloom when it comes to the state of the country outlook, and that's what she's preaching.
Well, Elijah, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
The election... Protests continue in Romania after Prime Minister Sorin Griniu announced his plan to reduce punishments for corruption offenses. The government scrapped the decree following demonstrations, but Romania is left divided. What's next for the Romanian government and people? Talking Points contributor Morgan Trow is here to discuss. Morgan, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So what's the root problem in the Romanian government right now?
Right now, the root problem is basically the citizens and the government have this total distrust of each other. The citizens don't believe that the government is doing what's in their favor and is basically making laws and decrees that go against everything they believe in. Such as there's this new decree that is showing that corruption charges will be decriminalized if it's under $47,500, meaning hundreds of different authorities could get out of jail, especially for these kind of charges. There was a specific incident where the head of the social party actually spent $27,000, and he is on trial right now, but that could all be ended if this law was passed.
Now, if this decree was canceled or reversed, why would protesters still be angry?
It actually got reversed 2 days after it was brought up because there has been mass protests. Over 500,000 people went out in one night and over 1 million people altogether. People are still angry at the government because they don't know what's going to happen. The prime minister is new. He only got elected in January, so if he's doing this now, what is he going to do in the future? They don't trust him, and they don't trust other people in the whole government and department. They're asking for a repeal of everyone.
Thank you for joining us, Morgan. When we come back, we'll be talking about new FCC regulations.
We'll be right back.
There's one thing you can never have sex without.
It's not something you buy.
Or something you take.
In fact, there's only one way to get it.
It has to be given to you, freely.
It's consent.
Because sex without it isn't sex.
It's rape. Consent.
If you don't get it, you don't get it. It's on us to stop sexual assault.
Learn how and take the pledge at itsonus.org.
Some say one of President Obama's notable accomplishments was maintaining net neutrality, which ensures that internet service providers don't offer faster service to companies who pay more. But Trump's new appointee to the FCC has been working in the opposite direction. For more on what the FCC is doing, we have Talking Point science and technology contributor Josh Feinblatt. Josh, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, guys.
So Ajit Pai is now the head of the FCC, and he's started working. But why haven't we heard a lot about him?
Well, he's been up to a lot. He's had at least a dozen actions in the past week and a half that he's done as head of the FCC, but not many were publicly announced. Actually, a majority of them weren't publicly announced, and the ones that were buried in the FCC's website. The only thing that he's actually mentioned was a blog post on Medium.com defending himself on Tuesday.
Now, because he's defending himself, what is drawing criticism to Pai?
Well, there's been two things, two major actions that aren't good for PR regardless of politics. The first one is he withdrew an effort to keep phone rates down in prisons, which never looks very good. And second, this is what he was debating in his blog post. He has stopped 9 service providers from giving discounted high-speed internet to low-income areas. Although it's about 1% of the amount that they providers that they have, it still, again, doesn't look good.
Is Pai trying to get rid of net neutrality, and if so, has he already started doing that?
Oh, it's no question. They're not hiding the fact that the Trump administration isn't a fan of net neutrality. He took his first step forward, closing an investigation into some of the practices of T-Mobile, AT&T, and Verizon about offering free streaming and downloads that doesn't count against data limits. So, for example, AT&T offers free streaming for DirecTV. Does that fall under net neutrality because they're favoring them? But they withdrew a request to research that more.
Now, considering those circumstances, what obstacles will Pai face along the way in achieving his goals?
Well, he definitely has an ally in Congress. He is very popular. He's in the Republican Party. He's a Republican. He's young. He's not white. He's Indian. So that makes him popular. He was nominated unanimously by the Senate to be a Republican Party position in the FCC under President Obama. But net neutrality is a big thing. It was big for President Obama, and it's already been held up in a D.C. court in Verizon versus FCC. So it's definitely going to be a long road.
Josh, thank you for being here. In January, during her final State of the City address, Mayor Stephanie Miner declared Syracuse a sanctuary city. Just 2 weeks later, President Trump issued an executive order that threatens to strip federal funding from all sanctuary cities. How could this affect Syracuse? Conor Wight went to the school district headquarters to find out more.
The City of Syracuse receives a great deal of money in the form of federal funds. According to the mayor's office, the city received about $22 million in the fiscal year of 2015. A sum that is dispersed to various city programs. The Syracuse City School District has the most to lose, as it receives between $40 and $50 million a year in federal grants.
How do you plan to lose $40 million? You know, I mean, what could you do?
Loss of these funds would leave major holes in Syracuse schools. Without federal help, the financially challenged city of Syracuse would be hard to make up the cash.
These funds provide a lot of additional support to our students. Additional academic intervention, after-school tutoring, after-school programs, additional staff.
At the moment, too many uncertainties exist to definitively say exactly what is going to happen. All of that ranges from whether or not Trump's executive order to defund sanctuary cities is legal, and, if Syracuse is defunded, whether or not that will directly affect the school district.
Be safe. It all depends on how he looks at holding funding away from, federal funding away from the city. Most cities don't have, other than the big five in New York, have funding, school district funding tied to the city. So there would just be Buffalo, Rochester, Yonkers, Syracuse, and New York City that would affect the school districts.
What happens next is anyone's guess. If President Trump's order is determined to be legal and is carried out, the future will be determined by whether or not Mayor Minor succumbs to the city's financial pressures, or if the city will continue to protect immigrants, regardless of legal status. Conor Wight, Citrus TV.
Despite our best efforts, we can't cover everything that happens in a week just in 30 minutes.
However, we here at Talking Points think it's important to pay attention to stories that aren't getting as much coverage. Here are some things that fell through the cracks.
Facebook has revealed new updates to the trending feature of its website to make topics more uniform across a given region.
Since coming under fire during the election for its handling of fake news, Facebook has made several changes to improve the quality of the content it provides to its users.
Lead levels in the drinking water in Flint, Michigan are now below the federal limit. While lower levels are an encouraging sign, some residents are still being told to use faucet filters or bottled water.
The city continues to replace old corroded pipelines, and officials say it could take years before the project is complete.
We'll be right back.
When I was in foster care, I never knew when I would have to move, so I always had my suitcase ready to go. Then one day, I was adopted. My new parents opened their hearts and home to me. My parents cook my favorite breakfast for me every morning. My parents take me on trips I never thought I would go on. They gave me a home and an even better reason to use that suitcase. My parents aren't perfect, but they're perfect for me.
To end the show, Mike and I are taking a look ahead at some developing stories.
Something to watch for is the developing relationship between President Trump and the judicial system. Going back to the campaign season, Trump attacked Judge Gonzalo Curiel, the judge in a fraud case surrounding Trump University. Trump said that Judge Curiel's Mexican heritage was one of the reasons why he was unfair to him in the case. More recently, President Trump attacked what he refers to as the so-called judge who halted the enforcement of the travel ban executive order. Trump issued several tweets casting blame on the judge and court system for any potential future terrorist attacks. While in both instances the Trump team has tried to defend the statements, they cast doubt and blame on one of the three branches of government, questioning its legitimacy. I will be watching to see how future judicial challenges that are in opposition to President Trump unfold.
Thank you for watching Citrus TV. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
I'm Mike Riccardi.
I'm Josh Carney. Good night, Syracuse.